Only took just a little bit for that bumper music to come back on here. Hey, Marky Billson with you. Tri-City Sports Now, 1420 WEMB Sports Radio. If you missed the show, shame on you for 6 weeks, but you can always watch it on archive, or you can watch it again, over and over and over again, slowly reviewing it by liking the most liked Sports Talk Radio Facebook page in the market. That's 1420 WEMB Sports Radio. Also, hey, why don't you follow me on Instagram? Why don't you follow me on Twitter? That's at Marky Billson. I think Instagram is at Marky Billson Tennessee Sports. Or, on YouTube. Yeah, and that's all Marky Billson, MarkyBillson. You'll get in YouTube, for that matter, Instagram as well, a lot of historic interviews. I just started up with the Instagram. Just started doing that to try to reach a younger audience, that sort of thing. Not that if you're 101, I don't want you to listen in. But I want everybody to. So I want to get all the, that sort of thing. Plus, I am the youngest Sports Talk Radio host in the market. I am also a child of the 80s, which tells you all you need to know about the market being a little bit behind the times, doesn't it? Talking about the All-Star Game. It's going on in Cleveland tonight. Last time it was in Cleveland, I think it was 97. And I remember it because I was the announcer of the Johnson City Cardinals at the time. Sandy Alomar had a big day. The American League won. Okay. So that's how that, has come about. By the way, let me see here. The won 6 games in a row for the American League. Let me get this. Yeah, the last time the NL won was back in 2012. And it has been now that the American League this past year, with their 8-6 victory at Nationals Park, surpassed the National League for having the all-time winning record. Now, let's see here. Now, the last time, as the way the All-Star Game stands right now is 44-43-2. And I think I had to go back to the 50s since the American League had the league. No, actually, the last time the American League had the league, here you go, it was in Cleveland, 63. And the National League beat the American 5-3. Willie Mays was, what was Willie Mays here? He was the MVP of the game, I believe. Yeah. So there you go. I'm looking at the historical records. Here are some names from the past. Larry Jackson defeated Jim Bunning, who was pitching for the Detroit Tigers at the time. And the next year he'd get traded to the Phillies, and he'd throw the National League's first perfect game of the 20th century. Of course, it was against the Mets. They weren't all that good back then. You look at no-hit. I mean, I'm impressed when, say, Nolan Ryan throws his 5th no-hitter against the Dodgers, who go on to win the World Series. When you're Sandy Koufax and you're no-hitting the 9th place Cubs, or Casey's Amazons. It's sort of like there's a reason why that's the team hit. That's anyway. Just though describing baseball, it still has the best All-Star Game, if for no other reason, because of the tradition, because of the celebration of baseball around it, because it can be at every city. It's not this weird thing that's played in Honolulu, which isn't played in Honolulu anymore because Orlando wants to be more in the sports market, and they can't get a football team because the Buccaneers and the Jaguars are too close to them. So they get a Pro Bowl and no Super Bowl players playing it, and it's a glorified touch football game anyway. And the best players don't come up. Now, I mentioned before, and yeah, I'm going to be old. I'm going to tell you the thing. Look, talk about pace of play in baseball. It's taking too long. I actually, look at college football. If you're going to play that game, that sport tends to drag out. But again, it's the way it's covered. It's the SEC. Boy, the South loves their college football. It's never, in Boston, not only could the Boston College Eagles never really expect to compete with the New England Patriots, just who wins and who loses, but it's even a more competitive and exciting game that the Patriots play. At a higher level, too. It's never that. What does college football have to do? Do they need to go to 3 quarters? It's the idea these people want to say that baseball should go to 7 innings or something, But here's the deal. They're going to have the DH, of course. I think if there's any game that shouldn't have a DH, it is the All-Star game. Because, there's the old thing about we want all the players to get in. They have rosters of, I think, about 102 players. And so how do you get all those players in? Solution, pinch hitters. There you go. And there's actually all that little strategy element as well. You can remember in '94 when the National League beat the American League, Bobby Cox had to call on Fred McGriff to be a pinch hitter. He hits a 2-run bomb in the bottom of the 9th, ties the game up. It's won in the 10th inning. Now think about that for a second. DH, there's not that strategy. There's not, I am going to select this player who should be in the Hall of Fame for the most important at-bat of the game. I've got that choice. He's got the opportunity to be a star. Okay, well, I've done the, DH, and I know that everybody says it's going to come to the National League in 2022 because the Players Union wants it. And the Players Union is resembling now what, the United Auto Workers were when they drove. You can debate this. Certainly Michael Moore doesn't believe this, but, when the auto companies started leaving Michigan, Detroit area, Flint, whatever, and going to places like Oshawa and Mexico and wherever, or for that matter, non-union states. I'll tell you what, basketball's All-Star Game is to me unwatchable. The only question I got is when they're going to score 200 points. It's not even Eastern Conference, Western Conference anymore. It's, let's get 2 players, and they'll select sides. So the NBA All-Star Game is recess at an elementary school. It's unwatchable. That's why the Stanley Cup playoffs actually do better ratings than the NBA All-Star Game. Don't believe me? 3.9 was the rating for the 2008 Stanley Cup Finals Game 5. 3.8 was the rating for the NBA All-Star Game last year. One time, I always thought the NHL had a real good All-Star Game. I can recall Mario Lemieux as a rookie, winning the MVP up in Calgary. That was a big thing. You knew then that Lemieux, his star, was going to shine really bright in the NHL, and it turned out to be the case. And, of course, a lot of my memories of Mario Lemieux were from the All-Star Game. I remember Ronald Reagan. This was a big thing when Washington, D.C. got the Hockey All-Star Game. He dropped the puck. That was big. That was during the Islanders dynasty. It was as if hockey had arrived, certainly in the nation's capital at that time. There was once even defense played in the NHL All-Star Game before Lemieux really broke open and changed the way the game was played, the All-Star Game. He scored 4 goals in 1990, a 12-7 victory for, what was it? It was the Wales Conference over the Campbell Conference in those days. And that 12-7 victory with his 4 goals, that really changed the All-Star Game into this high-scoring, no-defense affair. And since then, the winning team has scored more than 5 goals in all but one of the NHL All-Star Games, as they traditionally were. Now, Gary Bettman, he cut his teeth in the NBA, so he likes to do those NBA things in the NHL that the NBA, survives in spite of, draft lotteries, that sort of thing. And he wanted to change up the All-Star Game. So now they play with divisions instead of conferences or whatever. But at least the divisions do provide some sort of identity, unlike, Team LeBron and Team whoever else. And the players generally don't sit out the NHL All-Star Game the way they do, say, the Pro Bowl. Hockey used to even change their format during the Cold War, and twice there were a NHL All-Stars versus Soviet All-Stars. Those were big. Happened in 1979, 1987. 1987 was called Rendezvous 87. They played the games in Quebec, Quebec City. That's back in the era of the Nordiques, okay? And it was great. And they played 2 games. Viktor Titikov, who was the Russian Olympic coach in 1980, and for that matter in 84 and all that. He was the Russian coach, Viktor Titikov. He has like a brief, he's actually played. He's seen in the movie Miracle, as a matter of fact. But not actually Viktor Titikov, but an actor who looked like him, who played him. And anyway, the point that I'm making is that those are exciting hockey games that were played, and they got so much attention. I remember when Brian Moore, maybe not everybody, but there was a sportscaster at WCYB called Brian Moore. Okay, I think he left to join for religious exploits. But I remember, and you have to understand, hockey was never, ever, ever reported on local sportscasts around here. And he gave the scores of Rendezvous 87, and that was so big. Now, of course, historically, this radio station right here, 1420 WEMB Sports Radio, WEMB was the first station to broadcast a hockey game around here, first radio station in this market to do so. It was a 2017 All-Star Game event. Yeah, it was the tournament, divisions, all that, okay. But that was big. That was the All-Star Game. That's why I think the NHL All-Star Game is the second best. There's been talk of moving NASCAR's All-Star race around. Jerry Bonkowski has told us it might come to Bristol. Who cares if it does? I mean, I guess it'd be good for the economy and all that. Maybe. I don't know. But I think the NASCAR All-Star race, it's the same drivers that compete in every other race. It's just, it doesn't count on the point standings. What's the big deal there? But this is what I want to ask. Why the major sports leagues, where the players are often well known, why do they have all-star games in major leagues, but they don't have in minor leagues, where you could stand to learn the identity of the players? Let's just say the Appy League had an all-star game. It would reveal who the best players and true prospects were, something really unknown right now, even if the stats sheet is consulted, and I will tell you who they are later on in the show. For a change, the game would be marketed, not the bar in left field, not the bobbleheads, not that there's anything wrong with it, but the game would be marketed for a change in the Appalachian League. You'd have identity, the divisions. Hey, Tri-Cities teams going against the others. You could have similar all-star games. Now, football isn't conducive to it, but say SEC basketball, identifying who the stars are. Maybe allowing for one day Auburn and Alabama fans to come together and root for their team. It would identify who the best players in the conference are. They'd play hard because that would be improving their stock for future earnings. That's where I see the future of all-star games. It's nice when a showcase comes to your city, but that's the real highlight. Except for me, who, I'd like to see the National League, for old time's sake, tie up those standings. Atlee Hammaker.
Tennessee had 1,260.